And of course that beep means that another day down. And today we will talk about thankfulness. I have developed this phrase recently, and it's this: I want to leave Evraz with a truckload of experiences and a handful of regrets. And what that means is, I think we have to be very conscious about preserving our core values when we begin to take a place for granted. Now, I did not do a good job of always representing my king and his kingdom while I worked at Evraz. I let the culture suck me in. I let the exhaustion overwhelm me when I was working on the floor. I let my surroundings dictate my attitude. And without going into too many details, I didn't really like who I was the entire time I worked there. And that had less to do with the work itself than it had to do with the way that I let the work run me, if that makes any sense. Some of you are probably going, yep, I understand that completely. And still many more are probably shocked and appalled that I didn't do a great job at this. When I say I want to take a truckload of experiences and a handful of regrets, that doesn't mean that I want to minimize my failures. Like, I want to learn from them. I want to grow from them. Otherwise, they were useless. But I'm glad that there are far fewer failures than there were learning opportunities that I took well. So yeah, things that I'm grateful for having worked at Evraz. I got to know a bunch of guys that are experts in their field without ever having set foot in a classroom. You don't have to get a 4-year degree in a thing in order to be an expert in it. I know guys that can swap out turbos on Volkswagens, guys that know more about guns than I would ever care to learn, know more about mortgages, financial things, roasting coffee, and fishing and hunting than I could have ever imagined that I would learn. And that's just from the relationships that I built here. I know more about quality management system, the importance of documentation, and the importance in relationship and getting things done. And all those lessons have to do with my experiences at Evraz. They have to do with the lessons that I learned that were not in a standard operating procedure. And I will carry them with me forever. For the other things too, I learned how to operate a lot of machinery and a lot of equipment that I would not have otherwise had a chance to operate. It's just, as I was processing the video from my list of things that I'm not going to miss, it became painfully aware that there are a lot of things that I am going to miss. There's a group of guys here that, imperfectly grabbed a hold of me and tried to help me be a better person. Sometimes their concept of a better person was not my concept of a better person, and I will leave some of their advice by the wayside. But I think it's important to note that there's a group of guys in the shipping department. There's a lady boss in quality assurance, and several other people that took me by the collar and tried to help me grow. And for that, I am eternally grateful, and I'll be indebted for a long time for all of their efforts. Yeah, a truck full of experiences, a boatload of memories, and just a handful of regrets. And I think you need to equally acknowledge all of them. You need to equally acknowledge and give credit that it's due to each of those areas. So I learned so much working at Evraz. And I made friends, and I learned about labor. I've often said this, although this will be the first time on video, that, you know, I watched my grandfather and I heard stories about my grandfather, my mom's dad, Pa, and I heard stories about him laying brick in the Texas heat and coming home and being exhausted and working a hard day's work. And I always thought he must have been crazy to put himself through that kind of torture when there were other avenues of work, other lines of work that could have just as well provided for his family. You know, my other grandfather, my dad's dad, Pops, he was an accountant, I think. But he was a numbers man for Shell Oil. And, you know, their work histories are drastically different, but I learned from both of them about working hard. And at Evraz, I learned firsthand what Pa had modeled for his kids and for me about using your muscles and your labor to bring home a paycheck. And I learned how intensely gratifying that can be. And I really enjoyed it. Like, when I was out in shipping, working the floor, I enjoyed. And in fact, I prefer going home physically exhausted to going home mentally, emotionally, and psychologically exhausted. So that's a thing that I'm going to carry with me forever. And the guys on the floor helped me learn that. I learned about attention to detail and how important that is. Christine and the folks in tech services helped me learn that. Cannot afford to overlook details, whether it's buying a car, having a relationship with people, or filling out your taxes, or helping run a multi-million-dollar steel company. Like, you cannot afford to overlook the small details. That's just a sampling of the boatload of experiences. And the regrets, I wish that I had represented Christ more consistently at this job. I wish that I had done a better job calling out the good in people and helping people achieve their destinies. I did that a little bit with some of the guys that I worked with in shipping, but I think I could have been a much more powerful beacon of God's light if I had not been so self-centered, and if I had not let the schedule and the craziness and the other things overwhelm me like I did. So those are the reflections from day 14. Day 14.